Turning now to Texas, where parents are demanding police accountability over the Uvalde mass shooting, and activists are stepping up their campaign for gun control reform. Among the proposals, a ban on assault weapon sales, universal background checks and red flag laws. Well, to discuss this and more, I'm joined for perspective by Pastor Mike McBride, Director of Faith in Action's Live Free Gun Violence Prevention Campaign. Thanks for joining us this morning, Pastor. First of all, tell us a little bit about your own work. Some of your campaigns, they've helped to reduce gun-related violence in various cities across the US, including in Oakland and California. Tell us, how can some of those measures be applied nationally?
Well, our hearts continue to go out to all the victims in Texas and Buffalo, New York, and so many other cities across the country. The Live Free campaign is a national movement of faith leaders, of formerly incarcerated individuals, organizers who work to scale up public health strategies that reduce gun violence, to ensure that we have common sense gun laws that help restrict the availability of weapons, particularly to those who are not licensed because of their previous criminal history, their mental health issues, etc., to not have access to weapons. What we know is this, that a small number of individuals are often the ones who are driving 60% of gun-related shootings and homicides. Less than 1% actually is the figure, drive more than 60% of the shootings and homicides. And so we must work to literally implement public health strategies that help us reduce the amount of individuals who are shot, who are having access to these weapons. We must remove weapons of war, assault rifles from our public availability, so these weapons are not available in our neighborhoods and communities by anyone. These are some of the proposals that we've been working to scale up, and we're going to continue to do that literally all across the country.
And Pastor, people looking into the US from abroad, they might be thinking, well, Democrats are now controlling both chambers of Congress. We have a Joe Biden calling for greater gun reform laws. Why are efforts to pass new measures still not getting anywhere?
Unfortunately, in our Congress, there are certain procedures. That one is called a filibuster, which requires 60 votes in order to actually pass legislation. It is literally a procedure that causes in our country, our legislature, to be ruled by the minority. And what we know is, even though the Democrats may have control of the Senate, they may have control of the House, the Democrats may have control of the White House through President Biden. If we don't have 60 votes in the Senate, if we don't have 50 Democrats plus 10 Republicans that are willing to vote to address common sense gun legislation, then the minority of the Senate will actually hold hostage the totality of our country. 90% of the individuals in our country, even including NRA owners, NRA gun owners, they are for background checks. We know that this is a strategy that must continue to be pushed. They must sign the H.R. 8 background check law. They must reenact the assault weapons ban that used to be in place, that it was expired during the George W. Bush administration. We must continue to elect the right kind of folks, but then also fund gun violence prevention strategies that actually are public health related, that can reduce gun violence in our communities.
And many of those Republican senators who are opposed to reforms, they represent states with large pro-gun communities, so to speak. Tell us why the NRA is so powerful.
Well, the NRA has the ability to fund many of these Republican senators because of Citizens United, another series of laws and policies that actually make it possible for corporations to fund candidates without much cap on their donations, right? And so what we know is that we have too much corporate money that is involved in our elections. It is corrupting our democracy. We must continue to defeat the NRA at the ballot box And it's just important to continue to assert, all of you that are listening, that the NRA and the Republican senators who are held hostage by these NRA corporations and gun manufacturers, the actual voters and the individuals who are even a part of the NRA, they support common sense gun legislation. This is about senators, particularly Republican senators, refusing to do the will of the voters. And it is going to be up to us here in America to continue to vote these individuals out of office.
But apart from the political opposition, there's also pushback on attempts to reform the courts, and that's particularly the case since Donald Trump appointed hundreds of conservative judges right across the US.
Absolutely, absolutely. What we know is Donald Trump really stacked the courts in our country. Donald Trump, appointed hundreds of appellate judges that actually many of us believe do not actually believe in the law. They don't. They are inexperienced, and they are a part of the problem. And so the whole judiciary was reshaped by this past administration. President Joe Biden has attempted to fill many of these vacancies with more qualified judges. But we do have a judiciary under the previous administration that has indeed become much more partisan, much more willing to reinforce these kinds of rulings and decisions that many of us believe are not in the interest of our country. And so this is the reality. This is the political, the judicial reality. But I want you to know that there are organizers, freedom fighters, there are individuals who come from a long lineage of civil rights and human rights in this country that are not going to allow this wickedness to go unabated. We will continue to fight. I come from a tradition, particularly in our African American community, that understands what it means to fight for freedom. One could argue that our whole existence in this country has been about fighting against the judiciary and the political nature of oppression and civil rights. And so we will continue to do our work. We will continue to fight for freedom, and we do believe that we shall overcome one day.
Pastor, just one final question. Despite all your work on this issue, and notwithstanding the opposition in political circles and in the courts, some reforms have been introduced, but some of them have been ruled unconstitutional. So if we do get new measures being introduced in the wake of this latest mass shooting, if passed, they're also likely to face legal challenges, aren't they?
Absolutely. There may be legal challenges, but let us remember that there are several parts of the kind of government that we can't appeal to. The president has the ability to use executive orders, and I'm sure he will continue to do so. We have the ability to pass laws through our Congress. We will continue to do so. We have the ability to pass local and state laws that are not necessarily vulnerable to the kind of federal misappropriation of its kind of legal and political analysis. And so we will continue to use all standards, all pathways in our governmental system. We can vote, and there are midterms that are happening literally right now in our country this summer and in the fall. We're going to continue to use every tool, every pathway possible to make sure that we can have safe communities. The scriptures remind us in our tradition that we ought to be peacemakers, for we shall be called the children of God. That is who we are. That is what we will do. And we will continue to do the great work that our ancestors and so many have come before us to do.
Okay, we leave it there, Pastor, but thank you so much for joining us with that insight this morning. That's Pastor Mike McBride, Director of Faith in Action's Live Free Gun Violence Prevention Campaign. Thank you so much.